Three, two, one. Hey, podcast listening people. Connor Doobie here. Welcome in to B2B Mentors. And I have a treat for you today. One of my friends, special guest, we've had him on the show before, Jamie Shanks, is joining us for an interview today. So get ready for that. Make sure you do me a tiny favor. As you're seeing the stream, share it, like it. Even if not for you, I guarantee you there's somebody else in your network who will get value from this content. And if you want to listen after the fact, you can go on all your favorite podcast apps and subscribe to B2B Mentors. With that, my friends, let's go. All right, guys, I'm so excited to be here with you today. Like I said, I've got my friend Jamie Shanks with me. I'm about to pull him up on stage, but a little before the scene, so we can actually dive right into the meat and get past kind of the bio stuff. You know, Jamie is CEO of both Pipeline Signals and Sales for Life. Pipeline Signals is his newer company, right? Jamie's a multi-time entrepreneur, multi-time author, and Pipeline Signals is now pioneering relationship signal intelligence monitoring, where they monitor and mine your TAM, right? Your list of accounts for relationship connections, competitive intelligence, and compelling events like job changes. So if you're a seller, right, VP of sales, you oversee your sales department, you're a CMO, or you do anything to oversee your sales team, you're gonna wanna listen into this. With that, I'm gonna bring the man up himself, Jamie. Good to see you as always, my friend.
Thank you so much for the invite. Love the intro and the graphics. That was fantastic.
I've kind of spiced it up a little bit since, we've done this a little while ago. It was almost like a year and a half ago that I think, in fact, it was funny. I think I was on the road in a hotel randomly the first time that we actually did our podcast together. And I think you were hanging out outside by your boat deck.
Yeah, usually I'm outside. And so this actually is an outdoor office at our house in the city. So it's minus 27 Celsius outside. And I've turned off the space heater. So if you see icicles grow under my eyes here in about 20 minutes, you'll know why.
Yeah, and you better believe he's got the rad setup. I got a little tour a few days ago, and it's looking pretty good. And I'm just gonna brag a little bit. I told you I was moving to Florida. We've got 75 degrees Fahrenheit here, and sunny. So I told you and your wife, when you guys are sick of the cold crap, come on down, man. I got a spot for you.
I love it.
So anyways, let's dive in. You've made some major pivots this last year. Talk about the transition from Sales for Life and maybe just briefly talk about what sales, for those who maybe haven't even heard you before, what does Sales for Life do as a company and what was your transition into this new business?
Yeah, absolutely. So pioneered the topic of social selling. So 10 years ago, I become a partner and owner of Sales for Life. And ultimately, Sales for Life's job is to enable sellers to use social selling. So imagine tools like LinkedIn to be able to create sales pipeline and scale sales pipeline. And the customer base in Sales for Life has been primarily global enterprise, global mid-market, kind of the Microsofts, Oracles, and Intels of the world. So what had happened is over the years, we certified 250,000 sellers. And every time we were transferring this knowledge, sellers would write in our support tickets and ask us questions like, let me get this straight. You've been teaching me to do these sort of things like mining intelligence out of LinkedIn or creating advanced Boolean searches to identify competitive threats or job changes. Why don't you just do this for me? Now, when you own a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so you would say to people, well, hey, I have got to transfer knowledge. I'm here to teach. You should be scaling this across your organization so everybody understands these skill sets. But no matter how much you try as a global sales training company, you'll always encounter Pareto's law. And so that happened. So all the time we would get these inquiries about developing a monitoring service very much like cybersecurity monitoring, except for sales. And then COVID hit, and it dawned on us that, number one, I'd bought back a lot of my life. I was on 80 flights a year for 5 years in a row. It gave me the opportunity to pause, reflect, turn to my business partner, Amar, and say, what else can we do? And we decided to create a sister company, essentially. And Pipeline Signals does or thinks about the same problem, but attacks it from the opposite lens. So Sales for Life is there to transfer that knowledge and teach you how to mine signal intelligence, as an example. Amongst other things, it created a course called Social Selling Mastery. Pipeline Signals actually is a managed service transitioning into a SaaS software that what it does is it takes your total addressable market and the set of accounts that matter to you. So those could be customers and prospects. And we're looking for what's called relationship roadmaps, which means they either came from a customer into a prospect. They came, they're a brand new chief information officer, a brand new CMO, or they came from your competitor or connected to your competitor. And these are all challenges and opportunities in your accounts that we then push notify your sellers at the point of need in your CRM so that the sellers can execute against tasks. So that's the genesis of where it all came from.
And, for those listening, what's so cool too is like Jamie literally wrote the book on social selling. And that was how many years ago now?
So I wrote Social Selling Mastery, 2017 it released. And then the account-based sales development version of it called Spear Selling in 2019.
Which I did a research paper on your book. And then, it was just like, it's so crazy how life goes full circle. I reached out to you, connected, we chat, we do podcasts, like all that good stuff. And it's just like, it's amazing. But, it still surprised me when I really got into the world of B2B sales and B2B marketing, how resistant sales leaders are on social selling. And I mean, do you still think there's as much resistance today, or do you think COVID's really excelled that quite a bit?
If COVID had not have happened, you would definitely have less emphasis on digital, social, virtual. I mean, that's so some people call it modern. These are all interchangeable words for the fact that digital technology allows us with our left and right brain to make informed decisions by collecting research and then engage people in a bold and different way. And so we've been doing this with the telephone and email for years. Social media has just opened up the medium of communication and the amount of intelligence, sales intelligence you can glean about a person or an account. But if it hadn't been for COVID, social selling would still be at the tip of the spear of the hot topic. But in the last 2 years, companies recognize if they didn't change, they would die. And now it's been 2 years. There isn't a sales organization that would still exist without social selling.
And it's just selling, right? Because if you're using email, you're kind of using social digital tools in a way. Like, why does LinkedIn, why does Facebook, why does Instagram have to be any different? They just, like the most popular thing is like, my buyers don't operate that way. So, I'm just kind of bringing us back to the roots here, because getting the reinforcement from you is really, really powerful. And so a lot of people, I think, have still been resistant to it because they feel like their buyers aren't using social media. What's the truth behind that?
Well, instead of looking at it as social media as a medium, think about it. You were actually just a minute ago talking about the customer. And here's a fact and a study done by Gartner. It's well published. So if you look at a customer's journey and you were to ask a seller, where do I add the most value in the sales process? And I spoke pre-COVID at 20 to 40 sales kickoffs and quarterly business reviews a year. And I would always ask this question. And sellers would say, when I'm in the boardroom and I'm face-to-face with the customer, I'm a champion. Or if I could at least be on video with them or meet them at a coffee shop, that's where I shine. The problem is that's actually a really minute part of a total sales process. A Gartner study found that only 17% of a customer's journey requires that either face-to-face or virtual face-to-face meeting. The rest of the time, they're doing what's called asynchronous learning. So it's without you, the seller. So they're reaching out to their peer group. They're talking to internal key stakeholders. They're downloading research papers. They're Googling keywords. They're asking questions on social media. So 83% of that journey doesn't involve you. And so you have to interject yourself into those kind of collision points of learning. And on that list of those collision points, social media, peer-to-peer groupings, which social media is part of, those are a huge part of their online due diligence. So whether you think your customer doesn't log into LinkedIn this week doesn't mean that they're not asking people around, they're not reading threads, they're not downloading ebooks, they're not listening to podcasts. You need to be part of this community so that when a customer is thinking about a topic, you're somewhere to be found.
And just because you don't see them like your post or comment on your post doesn't mean they're not there observing. Right? It doesn't mean they're not there watching you.
Like an iceberg. Like the people that are liking and commenting there's something called the Chet Holmes pyramid. The Chet Holmes pyramid dictates that 3%, upwards of 10% of a market in any given time is actually in an active buying cycle. And they're the ones that are overtly showing you that they're interested. They're the ones that are filling in your chat, or they're, going onto the website, contact us, downloading ebooks and so forth. The other 90 to 97%, in a passive manner, they are still in a flux of change, and they're learning. And you don't know who those people are. So you need to be around when those people filter out.
Mm-hmm. Those influencers. So here on the other side of the coin, I'm on board with social selling. I'm using digital tools. And I did research for an article a couple of months ago on even just the MarTech and the sales tech stack that's out there. And it's in the tens of thousands, which is terrifying, right? And so we as sellers and marketers, sometimes we often over rely on tech and we under rely on tech. There's like a fine balance there. But your big premise is really buying back time, because your most valuable asset as a seller is the time you actually spend selling. Mm-hmm. So how can B2B sellers and marketers or SDRs, like how can we be more effective at buying our time back using insight signals and using pipeline signals format?
So we'll start at the problem and we'll work downward. So in 2011, Gartner has been doing studies every year on the percentage of sellers that have been making their sales quota. When I started Sales for Life, 6 of 10 sellers would make quota, 4 wouldn't. And every year they would update this study, and every year it got worse. By the year 2019, 50% of sellers would make quota, 50% of sellers
We're becoming way less productive. Then in an era we should be way more productive.
We became way less productive. And along that journey, there's a company that Gartner actually bought. It was a polar opposite research firm called Topo that was actually measuring the percentage of sellers that were not making their quota and trying to figure out why. In their studies, they found that 83.4% of sellers that don't make their quota, they don't make it because of poor time management. So now let's dive into the root problem. Sellers are really, really bad with their time. The single biggest decision as a seller you can make is around what's called account selection and account prioritization, which means, okay, I'm selling in Florida, and a seller is selling into the technology space. Account selection and prioritization means they'll randomly make a list of all the SaaS software companies in Florida, and then they'll call them A through Z. Or there's absolutely no prioritization and segmentation on what's going on. And what happens is you miss blatant opportunities or blatant threats in accounts. So that's kind of the big premise and problem. So
pause on that really quick, Jamie. Threats and accounts. What does that mean?
A threat in account could be you're about to tackle an account and start calling into it for what could be days, weeks, or months. and recognize that with a simple LinkedIn search, the chief operating officer, their last job was at your competitor. So the probability you're ever going to enter that account is next to zero. But you didn't do that due diligence, and you'll spend months talking to key stakeholders, slinging over proposals, only to try to unwind and unpack months later, like, why am I not winning this account? So if you understand the biggest problem, time management and account selection and prioritization is the biggest driver of time, right? It's because calling A through Z is a giant waste of time. Then as a seller, you have to recognize that signals come in three major categories. So sales intelligence or signals come in three major categories. Number one, you need intelligence around buying intent. Who's raising their hand? Who's Googling keywords that are important to you? Basically, who's interested? Now, that's not what my company does, but that's a form of sales intelligence that help you prioritize accounts. Data point number two is called workload consumption or product usage, which, as an example, so say you sold a software, you could tell through your own technology who's using it more, who's using it less, who's using it the right way, who's using it the wrong way. So if I'm a customer success representative, I could figure out, are they a churn risk or is there a great opportunity because of their usage? Again, a category I don't get involved in, but really important. And even in pre-sales, there's technology that tells you what tools and technology that company that you're prospecting is using. So are you wasting your time, or are you barking up the right tree?
Mm-hmm.
The third category is where we get involved: relationships. You have to understand as a seller that companies don't make decisions. People do. People within the companies are the ones that set a priority or take a priority away with them. So follow the people. I want to see people going in that came from my, what we call asymmetric competitive advantages. So I have a disproportionately greater opportunity to unlock an advocate who liked me at another company going in somewhere else. That's part A. Or I've got to figure out if there's a competitor doing the same thing. And then who's starting all these new jobs and who's leaving these companies? Because every time somebody new comes in, priorities change. Somebody leaves, priorities change. And this basis of sales intelligence, if you use it correctly, you dramatically change the way you select and prioritize accounts.
Is it ideal to hit a prospect when they're newer into the company because they're more likely to be shaking things up, changing vendors over, versus someone who's been in a position for the last 15, 20 years? Like, where would I focus my attention in terms of account priority?
So if we were to focus it on those that can make change, so think of key stakeholders, decision makers, champions, heavy influencers. So there's an unconfirmed statistic that I keep reading about that in the first 100 days that somebody takes a job, and you're coming in as the chief marketing officer, so you're poised to bring change. What do you want to do? You want to bring in new people, process, and technology. In that first 100 days, you will either have mentally deployed or actually physically deployed up to 70% of your remitted budget within 100 days. Because you get in there, you figure out where the bathroom is, you figure out who the people that you work with, you do an assessment, and you go, okay, that was great. I'm about 30 to 45 days in. But if I don't shake things up, all the eyes are going to start looking back at me. And so I need to make change. And that's when they're the most pliable or malleable to suggesting new ideas that can make an impact. That's when you want to be there. The other way I look at it is, think of like the movie Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio. The whole movie was about planting a seed in somebody's mind. Well, you got to do that before your competitors start planting tons of seeds and like take away all the mind share of that buyer. That's why you want to be first.
Yeah. It's always an interesting point. So how do we actually, once we have the data, which is the biggest complication, is just collecting data, like spending freaking time on data versus like actually reaching out, right? Actually making a connection. How do you recommend now in this 2022 environment we make the approach, right? What kind of like script or format or style do you think is winning when it comes to actually reaching out to a new account who you've never met?
Yeah. And we have customers experimenting and trying all kinds of different sales plays. But the best way that I believe to open a door, and we're going to start by looking at it in reverse. What is your goal when you're trying to start a conversation? It's not to sell Connor the next widget or boobob. My goal is to earn 30 minutes of time in Connor's calendar next week. Because unless you have a B2C product or you're selling e-commerce, you're not selling through an email, right? This has a natural B2B sales cycle. So if my outcome is to earn 30 minutes on Connor's calendar, I have to give Connor enough knowledge for him to warrant exchanging with me time, because he's selling time and I'm selling knowledge. So I have to give him enough nugget of gold where he goes, wow, that's interesting. I want to exchange 30 minutes, which is worth X to him for that time. Well, that means my message has to both give like overt value, and it has to give enough knowledge to warrant that time exchange. And there's a couple other components to messaging, but when you take that information, flip it on its head, that helps you craft a message. You have to give something that is worth, whatever worth it is to you, 30 minutes. That could be, that knowledge has to be worth that. And if you're not doing that, and you're just saying, hey, congrats on your job. You used to work at one of our customers. Do you want to meet next week? Like, why? Like, I don't have to. That's not valuable enough for me. So you've got to tell me something I don't already know.
And then should I start with emails, start with phone calls, start with a video pitch? I mean, what's like the number one channel I start with?
Well, so for us, because we eat our own dog food, we actually have a two-pronged.
Which there's got to be a better term for that. I don't know who came up with that.
Eat your own dog food? Yeah, I guess so. For us, we're sending an email that has text and video, and we're sending a LinkedIn message that has text and video. So for us, like I can't predict which medium of communication is best with you. So I'll use all, but I also use video in each and every one of those. Why? 3 reasons. 1, humanizes myself. 2, 100%. Synthesizes ideas down to a minute. 3, tracking buying intent. I can see if you clicked on the video. So now I'm coming back to my root cause and root problem, time management. I want to know account segmentation, who's interested and who's not, and I'll focus on the interested people.
And does Pipeline Signals manage that kind of send technology, or do you integrate that in with other tools? And if so, what other tools do you prefer?
Yeah, so here's so what we're doing at Pipeline Signals is think of research as critically important, but you also know as a chief revenue officer or head of RevOps that's a $5 an hour task. And you want your sellers doing $500 an hour value creators. So all the research that needs to happen in tools like LinkedIn to be able to figure out who are the new key stakeholders, who came from your customers connected to your prospects. We're doing the mining, the monitoring and the mining, and we're creating a data uploader and push notifying that directly into your CRM. So think of us as middleware or plumbing. The sellers don't know nor care we exist. The outcome is that the sellers wake up on a Monday morning and there's a task waiting for them that says, Jane Smith just came from one of our happy customers and they're over in this account. Here are the next 5 chess moves you should run to execute engagement against that opportunity. And at that point, the seller uses their own context to decide. And for a lot of our customers, they'll pull down a sales play from SalesLoft or Outreach or Revenue.io, and they'll take a sales play and they'll deploy it or series of cadence sales plays to the customer. But that's up to the discretion of the seller. What we're doing is giving them prescriptive information to make an informed decision.
So what are your top 3 other tech stacks that you just absolutely adore and would recommend to anybody?
It's funny because, I run two small businesses, so my tech stack is pretty limited. But if I were to look at it from the lens of our customer, when it comes to prospecting, I mean, I won't even mention CRM, because everything that has to go into a CRM as the record of truth for all account and contact information. So above and beyond that, what we see in almost every one of our sophisticated customers, you now need to run a campaign against things like Signals. So you have a choice. Does the seller do this manually, or does the seller use an engagement platform to be able to drive a series of sales plays at speed, right? Because everything's about time management. So that's in sales. So I would say the first thing you would probably need is a sales engagement tool. And again, the three biggest one, Revenue.io, SalesLoft, Outreach as an example. From there, as the medium or as the communication is going to deploy, I am very bullish on video needs to be part of that. And so for us, I'm a huge fan of Vidyard. And so video deployed in that email or in that LinkedIn message. And then I don't know what a third one would be yet. It's funny, as a guy now who owns a tool that, a platform within RevTech, I don't actually, know all the tools, right? So
Yeah. Well, again, there's too many in there to keep track of. But I mean, just as a reminder too, you guys, as you're listening to this, definitely go check out pipelinesignals.com. Just learn, right? Educate yourselves. There's nothing wrong with educating yourselves, but it's really, the chances are you could probably eliminate a lot of the technology that you have right now and focus in on the top 2 or 3 or 4 higher impact tools that you can use, like Pipeline Signals.
You're giving something, and I know you probably got to go. I'll actually, what I have learned after training 500 or 600 global customers, right? The biggest tech companies on planet Earth, and then now seeing a platform or tool go inside a company. If a tool or an enablement program or whatever isn't in your top 3 initiatives in the next quarter, you should not use it and get rid of it. I have watched endless companies where we're rolling out like a 6-figure global sales training program, but at the same time, they're doing 6 other projects. And I'm listening to a book called Amp It Up, the CEO of Snowflake, and his exact words are, if these are a series of priorities with a plural, then you have no priorities. So he forces his C-level executives to tell me, what is the one thing you're going to do this year? What is the one project? Because
I love it.
You can't narrow it down to that. This isn't.
We're just in a world of overabundance of noise and distractions, and so that's been my personally, just even as I'm trying to grow our own business, is like, okay, dude, forget about what you can add. What are the things you can eliminate so that you can really, really focus in on the one thing?
I heard Grant Cardone and Jared talk about this on a podcast, that every quarter they actually spend time talking about eliminating one thing. Like, they don't add projects. If anything, if the business slows down even a hair, it's always about cutting down to like 1 or 2 things.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, Jamie's not going to brag about himself, so I'll do it for him. You actually spoke on Grant Cardone's stage back in, what was it, maybe 2016?
It was the first GrowthCon. I almost did the name, like the next GrowthCon. There you go. Yeah,
dude. I'll tell you, you do not use that enough in your branding. Just even the videos, like all that, you on that massive stage and stuff. You really don't use that enough in your branding.
All the speaking engagements I've ever done, that was the most nerve-rattling, because I've typically had 500 or 1,000 sellers in suits and ties, but this was thousands of people, all walks of life, guys that own landscaping companies to painters. I walked in on stage and I felt like I was at a rock concert.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know I watched it. I think before I reached out to you back a number of years ago, I watched your recording. I watched it a handful of times, and I mean, dude, you're great on stage.
I was
It's fun to watch
shocked
you.
in the first 20. You can't
And
tell, but I was actually shocked. Like all the lights, they had a guy following me around with cameras. I'm like, oh my God.
And you were showing Sales Navigator on screen, which is like, it's so crazy that even to this day, just people do not realize the power of LinkedIn still.
No concept of it. Yeah.
Actually, that was something I wanted to ask you. What's next? Like, LinkedIn's how much are we going to be relying on LinkedIn in the business world? Do you have any insights on what's
I
coming
used
down
to
the
be a
pipe?
prognosticator, and quick backstory and then prognosticate. So when Navigator came out, they tried to form a roundtable committee of 5 major influencers and training companies that would shape the future of Navigator. Now, obviously, Sales for Life, and I was invited to that roundtable. And it didn't pan out, it didn't actually happen. And I would make all these bets on what first Navigator would end up doing. And a lot of it never happened. And then I would see other platforms, Facebook for Business, try to get in the space. And I am amazed another platform hasn't built like-minded business to business community. So I'm actually done prognosticating because like I'm batting like I wouldn't even make a AAA team right now on bets, right? So
There's and you just got to wonder like Facebook has tons of different like consumer type competitors, but nothing scratched the surface in terms of LinkedIn, and it still works. It still works so well. And there's so many people who didn't adopt it years ago that are now finally using it, consuming on it. The pandemic kind of forced them to be like, okay, I guess I'll check out the social media thing. Let's see what's going on here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it blows my mind. Are you going to check out audio events at all? Did you get access to that? Like you've been on Clubhouse a couple of times, I think, right?
I've been on Clubhouse as a guest, but I don't use Clubhouse. And then I don't seem to see it as often anymore. Like either one of two things is either I'm becoming a lot less cool, or I'm actually learning as I get older, kind of back to the conversation we've had. Like, I follow an EOS. I've got an EOS book sitting right next to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've got our rocks for the quarter. And if it isn't one of those rocks, I have learned over time, I do one of these. And even things like social platforms. I used to be a big advocate of Twitter. I used to be on Twitter a lot. I haven't used it in years. Now I'm my sandbox is getting smaller, and I'm learning it isn't for me about like the width of the community. It's the depth of the community that will drive the opportunities.
I love that. Thank you for validating me too, because my marketing theme for this year truly is community, right? Like just really going deep on community versus going super wide.
If a community is only 100 people, but those are 100 raving fans that have a checkbook, that's way more valuable than sitting on a Ferrari and getting 1 million likes, but nobody buys, right? So
nobody wants your rented Ferrari. Do you have like 60 more seconds, couple more minutes to wrap up here? Okay, cool. So I want to go high level here really quick because I think this will also be very, very helpful for a number of folks listening. Talk to us about the fundraise. What were some of the surprises and, just nuances of, raising capital for the pipeline?
I never raised capital before. So I'm as new as somebody coming out of college and starting a software company. So there's two things that I learned. There's something called founder market fit and then product market fit. Now we were in the pre-seed stage. So that means that you are just building an MVP of a product. And in fact, we're a managed service that's transitioning into SaaS. And so from a product standpoint, there's not much there yet, except that it is deployed as a service. I'm very fortunate to have built a community and had extreme amounts of founder market fit. So investors were willing to come towards Amar and I because they knew we know the problem down to the molecule. That was a good side. There were a lot of doubters for a variety of different reasons. So you do have to knock on a lot of doors, even though the world is flush with capital, even though we have extreme founder market fit. There's a lot of doubters in the ability to transition from a services business to a tech business because they're different. There were a lot of doubters that said, why are you raising capital in the middle of the winter at Christmas time? So we closed the round. We started the round early or mid-November, and we closed it in 7 weeks. So the other thing that we learned is it is very different conversations from talking to private investors, angels, family offices, wealthy, C-level executives who've had big exits from companies versus institutional money. So we went down the route of dealing with sales influencers, CEOs, chief revenue officers, those that we could have like-minded conversations. We weren't, and we learned quickly, we're not ready for the VC conversation yet. Yeah.
By the people, for the people. That's how you decided to approach it.
All of our investors are either a CEO or a chief revenue officer.
Wow. So you just really tapped on the shoulder of your community and relationships that you've.
And we do a 5-minute demo, and they're like, give me the term sheet because I know exactly the problem that you're solving. Whereas the VC is looking at this. The big learning from VCs is the way that they deploy capital. Say they made 5 bets a year. Each one of those bets have to be $1 billion or bust. So if you're not trying to build a $1 billion company, then there's no sense deploying the capital. Yeah.
Right. They're just sprinkling around, waiting for that one to 100% pop. Well, cool. All right, brother. Well, anything else actionable strategy? The floor is yours in the last 60 seconds, whatever you'd like to share before we wrap up here.
No, I would have, if you're listening to the call and you're a CEO or involved in the revenue side of the business, and you're looking at the way your sellers spend their time, the way that they make decisions around which account should they focus on today versus tomorrow, why that account over the next account, there's a lot smarter way to do this. And it's to recognize you pay your sellers a lot of money to execute and market, and that you can have a partner, and that's what we do, to take those $5 an hour tasks and help them make decisions based on very overt, sales intelligence that's sitting inside tools like LinkedIn to be able to give them that intelligence to find opportunities and threats and accounts.
Know your numbers, guys. Like theme of 2022, like really know your numbers. What is your time worth per hour? What are your sales? What is every single person on your team? What is the value of their time per minute, per hour? Know your numbers. Yeah. And then the rest of it will make sense. Cool, man. Well, best way people find you, follow you, definitely check out pipelinesignals.com. And then best way to connect up with Jamie Shanks.
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. Instagram has tried to be a balance of a father, a wannabe athlete, and a CEO.
I'll tell you, it's fun to watch Jamie on Instagram. One day you're like skiing in the snow, or you're like out in like negative 20-degree weather, like on the skis on the water right by your lake. You got the beautiful boathouse out there. So
well, wait till next week. Myself and 42 CEOs are on the Powder Highway skiing at all these resorts. So it's going to be great.
You're going to get some content, bring in some film crew, or get some videos for us.
Crew is that.
There you go. That's awesome. Well, I sincerely appreciate you, man. You really inspire me. And, I always love connecting with you. You're an inspiration to many of us entrepreneurs out there and those of us in the world of B2B sales and marketing. So I'm super grateful for you. Thank you for joining us today. Guys, make sure you connect. Jamie, stick around for one quick second here. For the rest of you, please make sure you share this out. Make sure you subscribe on all your favorite podcast apps. Go check out Pipeline Signals. And before I forget, next Thursday, the 27th, if you want a chance to connect with high-level, like-minded B2B marketers, we're putting on a completely free B2B marketing mastermind. Okay, so you can check out the B2B Mentors Mastermind. Go to activeblogs.com/live event. With that, my friends, much love to you. Make it great, and I'll see you on the other.
Yeah.